Hello and welcome to Storytime Facebook Live at 5 with Jennylynd James. Let's wait for a few people to join us and then we'll start our book reading. Hello and welcome. Who's here today? Oh, Mary Jo, hi. Thanks for joining me. So good to see you through the internet. Thanks for joining. So we're going to wait until 5 o'clock and hopefully a few more people will join us. So how are things with you in Florida? Send me a note. Hello, hello. Long time no see. Of course, we can't see like Zoom, but this is okay. And we have another person joining us. Welcome. Who's out there now? Oh, yes, madness in terms of what? COVID-19 in Florida? Oh, COVID Central. Well, keep safe. Keep very safe. Wear all your protective gear. That's why we have indoor activities these days to keep safe. But anyway, what can we do? Take all the precautions necessary. So we'll wait for a few more minutes and then we'll get started. So here in Ontario, we were expecting a big rain storm with winds, hurricane winds, and threat of tornado. But so far so good. Everything has just passed away, and we weren't really affected. So I'm glad about that. But we had several warnings today. Right, so just a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, let's get going. It's 5 o'clock by my watch. So welcome and thanks so much for joining our story time today. I'll tell you a little bit about my publications as we get started. So the first book I wrote, first memoir, is called Escape from Ireland. And this talks about what life was like as a new immigrant to Ireland. I lived in Ireland for 7 years. And when I moved to Toronto in 2011, I couldn't get Ireland out of my head, so I had to write about it. So this was the first memoir I published. Then after that, I wrote the memoir called Goodbye Frying Pan, Hello Fire. And this talks about what life was like as a newcomer to Toronto. Now, I had studied in Montreal, lived in Quebec for many years as a student, but I never lived in Toronto. So moving here from Ireland was culture shock. And Goodbye Frying Pan, Hello Fire talks about that shock and all the hurdles I had to jump over to settle in a big city like this. Then I wrote the book Red Car Long Legs. And Red Car Long Legs talks about the adventures I had while living and working in California. So I worked in the fresh fruit and vegetable industry in California for about 6 years and had many adventures traveling for work. And it talks about the people who were bound for Hollywood in Southern California, as is the case with many of them. The day job is a shoe salesman, but we really want to be a movie star. So that's what Hollywood is all about. And then Drive, who we read from this book last week, Drive talks about going back home to Trinidad and Tobago, my country of birth, and what it's like returning home. Sometimes I feel like a tourist because everything has changed. And many people have left home and they live in other countries. So Drive talks about going back to Trinidad and Tobago and taking foreign friends to Trinidad for a visit. Now today we're going to read from two books. Where Are My Car Keys, which talks about my mother's journey with Alzheimer's disease and how our family coped over the years. And then I'll also read a few passages from Is That My Granny, which is the children's companion book and the first children's book that I wrote, which addresses the same topic of Alzheimer's disease. A new publication on the way, and my first novel, first fiction, Mrs. Somebody, What She Did for That Ring. So this is coming up soon. We hope to launch in August 9th. So keep that date handy in your diary. This book talks about dating in North America in the 90s. It's set in the 1990s and the early 2000s. From no technology to the full use of technology in dating and finding Mr. Right. So lots of jokes in my new novel that's coming up. So look out for it. Mrs. Somebody. Okay, so we have some more people who just joined us. Welcome. Put your name in the chat box so I'll know who's here. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. What I'm going to do is read the introduction of Where Are My Car Keys? A Mother's Journey with Alzheimer's Disease. Now, I wrote this book when my mom died in 2018 of Alzheimer's disease, and it was a form of healing. It helped me in many ways to cope with losing my mother, because as many of you know, if you lose a parent, it feels like the end of the world, you know. And I've lost both my parents, so sometimes I feel like an orphan because who can I talk to when I have serious problems? Usually the parent is always there as a stable person for guidance, you know. Yes, so who else is joining us? Oh, Sherry Ann, hello. Hi, Sherry Ann. Who else is here? Put your name in the chat box so I can see. Welcome, welcome. So now let me read the introduction to Where Are My Car Keys? Alzheimer's disease is described as a progressive deterioration of mind, personality, and body caused by the degeneration of the brain. The disease can begin in late middle age and continue into old age, but what starts the brain's deterioration is yet unknown. Learning about another family's journey can sometimes help in understanding and preparing if your loved one is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Everyone is affected by Alzheimer's disease differently, but an emotional roller coaster is an almost universal journey for caregivers and family members. This book describes our family's voyage as our mother, Gloria James, or Mammy as we called her affectionately, battled with Alzheimer's disease over a period of 12 years. It is a collection of stories beginning in 2006 when my siblings and I first acknowledged that our mother's mental and physical state were changing, until her eventual death in January 2018. One of our concerns was that many elderly parents of our peers in Diamond Vale, Diego Martin, had also developed Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia. We joked about this, saying there must have been something in the water. We saw a pattern that could not be coincidental, and yet, as far as we knew, nobody was researching this trend. The cause of this debilitating condition is unknown. Would I develop the disease if my grandmother, my mother, my uncle, and my aunt all had this condition? Was it truly hereditary? Was it an affliction which plagued people who lived through World War II rations in Trinidad? Was it related to their diet? With so many questions and no answers, it's difficult not to worry. I don't want to become a statistic. Now, I know I have some friends on here who grew up in Diamond Vale, Diego Martin. Oh, hi, Mrs. Birch. Hi, Sherry Ann. Hi, Jill. Yes, there's so many coincidences, and many people, even on the street that I grew up on, Pearl Parkway, Diamond Vale, Diego Martin, many parents afflicted or died of Alzheimer's disease. So we don't know if it's regional, if it was something in the diet or the water, but it is a frightening thought. What do you all think? Mary Jo, any comment here? How many people do you know from Diamond Vale who had dementia or Alzheimer's disease? Yes, so leave me a comment in the chat box. All right, now I'm going to read about a time when my mother came to visit me while living in Ireland, and the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's. So a few short passages from that time period. My mother was turning 77 in 2009, and her friend Kim was a few years her junior. Mommy and Kim had taught at the same secondary school in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and remained friends long after retirement. Kim, from what I remembered, was soft-spoken with a definite twinkle in her eyes. She made jokes sometimes, but always out of earshot when I was growing up. Kim was still very active and physically fit. The years had not been as kind to my mother after retirement, however. Her body was succumbing to arthritis in the knees and hands, but the worst affliction was the degeneration of her mind as a result of Alzheimer's disease. Mommy was losing her confidence and her memory, and recognized the fact that she could no longer travel alone. She had loved to travel frequently in her younger years, jetting to United States, England, or countries around the Caribbean. The whole year had passed without a trip, and I suggested she and Kim come to visit me for Christmas. So they came for a visit. Kim had to be her eyes and ears, of course, because her mind was going. So let me read another passage. They flew from Trinidad to London via Barbados, and then I went to collect them in London and brought them back to Ireland. So it was a really long journey for both of them. Mommy was extremely disoriented and nervous. She spilled her tea on the table in the restaurant when we were getting a little tea before leaving for Dublin. I knew it was a very long day for both of them. As we drove to Waterford, Mommy got more and more agitated. The small roads were long and winding through every town. I knew every bend in the road, but for the unsuspecting traveler, it was grass, forest, trees, bush, and endless bush. "You are taking me in the forest to kill me," Mommy protested. "Where are we going? Put me out now so I could take a taxi home." There was no stopping her, and Kim sat quietly, not knowing what to do. Mercifully, we got home in good time, and we were able to get Mommy settled in the bedroom. "Where am I?" she asked. "How did I get here?" I had to explain about 3 or 4 times how they flew to London via Barbados, and then from London to Dublin, and then we had to drive from Dublin to Tramore. Every time I said Tremor, Mommy said Tremore, Tremore. I said Tremor again, and she said Tremore, Tremore. It was truly funny. So that little passage just describes when my mother and Kim came to visit me in 2009, and it was actually the last international trip my mother had taken. And so much happened on that trip. I will tell you about the one time when I decided to get a night off from babysitting or adult sitting, my mom and Kim and my daughter. So I went out on New Year's Eve, or Old Year's Night as we call it in Trinidad. And while I was packing my bags to leave for the night, Kim and Mommy showered me with advice on what I should wear. You must wear stockings. You can't have your legs out. That dress is too short, they said. You should have chosen something else, said Mommy. You can't wear such tiny underwear, said Mommy. I told her it's called a G-string. She said, oh, that's so commonplace and low class for a lady. I'll lend you one of mine. Mommy, yours may be too big for me, I told her. I'll use what I have. Tiffany couldn't stop laughing at the old grannies as they helped me prepare for my one night off. I left Kim in charge of the home with extra food in the refrigerator and ideas for what meals they could prepare the next day. Kim wanted to go for a walk around the small town of Tremor, and I agreed since she was fit and needed some exercise. Free at last, my friend and I drove happily out of town. We were excited for the upcoming night of fun. It was to be a large dinner and dance with hats and whistles, and the opportunity to stay overnight at Clontarf Castle in Dublin. Reports of the pending heavy snowfall filled the airwaves, but not much had fallen by the time we were on the highway to Dublin. Just as we passed Kilcullen exit in County Kildare, I got a phone from my neighbor in Tremor. She said Kim had fallen down in front of my house and couldn't walk, and they had to call the ambulance. So can you imagine? I left Kim in charge of my mother and my daughter to have one night off, one night. And disaster came. She fell and she actually broke her hip. She broke her hip, and I had to rush back down from Dublin the next day. So in the book, you'll read all about the drama that happened. If you get a copy of Where Are My Khakis, lots of drama with the broken hip and the hospital, and I was out of town, lots of drama. But what happened in the end, before I could even get back to Dublin, Kim had hip replacement surgery. And she had to remain in hospital for quite a while. But my mother's plane ticket was about to expire, and she had to go back to Trinidad. So I'll tell you all what happened. The hospital was ready to discharge Kim, but I couldn't take care of her. We had a long flight of steps just to enter the front door of my home, and Kim couldn't walk, and all the bedrooms were on the second floor of the house. So the hospital agreed to keep her until she recovered. Since Kim couldn't use her ticket to return to Trinidad, I'd made arrangements to book her on a later flight. In the meantime, my mother also had to go back to Trinidad. Winter was no good for her, and I had to start back working. The dilemma was how she would travel alone to Trinidad. My brother and I decided to do a relay of sorts. I would ensure that she boarded the plane to Barbados at Gatwick Airport in the UK. Then he would fly to Barbados to meet her when she landed and collect her in time to change planes for Trinidad. Every flight had to be well timed as I handed her over in a wheelchair in London, England. I kept asking the attendant to make sure she got on the airplane. I didn't want her walking around the airport alone. When I told the attendant this, she hit me and pretended that I was being extra careful with her, and she made jokes with the attendants and winked and pinched me. She declared that she wasn't a child and she didn't need assistance. Can you imagine? As I flew back to Ireland, I had visions of my mother walking around Gatwick Airport and not boarding that airline. I couldn't sleep for the whole night until I knew she was safe with my brother and he had met her at the airport in Barbados. I tried calling him numerous times, but of course he couldn't answer because he was flying. Finally, the next day, I got news that all was well and Mommy was back in her home. But her trip wasn't without drama. He found my mother wandering around outside of the airport in Barbados because she thought she had arrived home in Trinidad and she was going to take a taxi home. So what do you all think about that? The relay. A relay with my mother to drop her off at one point, make sure she boarded the plane. Then my brother had to fly to Barbados and collect her. Put in the chat box what you think about that relay, human relay. It was a very difficult decision to make, but we had little choice. So somebody tell me, would you have done a relay like that if it was your parent? Put a comment in the chat box. Let me hear. Let me hear what you think. Now remember, she wasn't thinking straight. She was completely disoriented and didn't know where she was. But, however, when I was trying to get her with assistance in Gatwick Airport, I mean, nobody, the attendants wouldn't believe that she couldn't think for herself because she was pinching me and acting normal. So everybody thought she was normal. Okay, WIS, good old Barbados. My favorite, not so favorite place. Realistic and scary. Yes, Mrs. Booch. And we were very lucky that it worked out because she walked out of the airport. She was walking home to Diamond Vale to go Martin for all she knew. Yes, it was quite a scary prospect. And thank goodness it worked out for us. Now I'm going to read a passage from when my sister lived in the United States for many, many years. Oh, hi Colette, glad that you're there. I'm going to read about when my sister attempted to move back to Trinidad and help my mother. Okay, yes, so people say yes, they would do the same thing if they had to. Now, this passage called Colette Moves Back. So hi Colette, I'm going to read about your trials and tribulations with Mommy. My sister was not happy with her situation in the United States and decided to move back to Trinidad. She packed lock, stock, and barrel in 2011 with her son Kadir and took up residence in Gloria's house. At first, it seemed like the best idea. She would be able to keep an eye on my mother to ensure that she didn't harm herself, as Alzheimer's disease continued to affect her mind and body. This decision proved to be a nightmare, however, My mother was quite attached to her car, and after a while she started fighting and challenging anyone who asked to use it. Colette had to get a job soon and also her own vehicle. When she decided to clean the house and renovate many areas that were in various states of disrepair, it caused a lot of problems. Mommy had accumulated clothing, kitchenware, trinkets, and many disposable items as she became obsessive and lived alone. One had to fight her to clear debris out of the house. Colette also brought her own things in the house, so she had to sort everything out and remove old or derelict items without my mother knowing. On many occasions, my mother would say, go back wherever you came from. Stop throwing away my things or I'll knock you over. If you throw away my things, I will knock you over. Go back where you came from. So redecorating the house was a grueling task, but Colette managed to bring the home back to its former glory. Many verbal fights ensued, with my mother threatening my sister physically. Colette called to tell me she had hidden all the knives in the house in a place where my mother could never find them. Colette had to sleep with one eye open because during the night my mother walked around making mischief. It was another symptom of Alzheimer's disease. Another point of contention was that Colette had a lock installed on the bedroom door. It was the room that we occupied as children, and my mother always wanted to go rummaging through her belongings or misplacing important documents. So before going to work, Colette had to be sure that that door was locked. This irritated Mommy, who complained that it was her house and she should be allowed to enter any room she wanted. One day, my mother removed the louvers at the south end of the bedroom, and she climbed into the room and unlocked the door so she could access the bedroom. This made Colette really mad, because when she returned for work that day, the door was wide open and a few items were moved out of place. My mother was in her garden happily tending to her plants and had completely forgotten that she climbed into the room. And she left all the telltale louvers on the floor beside the window. Another day, the neighbor told Colette that Mommy came over to ask her grandson Giovanni to climb through the window to open the locked door. That weekend, Colette arranged for a handyman to completely seal the back window with concrete blocks while Mommy was out. She then reinstalled the curtain over the area, and there was a lot of fretting and threatening when agile Mommy found the area permanently sealed and she couldn't climb in. So what do you all think about that? Let me see. Natasha said, glad your mother made it home safe and sound. Yes, we were happy that she got there safely. Yes, so what do you all think about my mother being agile enough to climb through a window to open a door that was locked? She wanted to be able to enter every room in her house. It was her house, and she had to enter. Tell me what you all think about that. Because she could climb. She had no problem. She was as strong as ever. At that stage, the early stages in the disease, she was quite strong and always up to mischief. Tell me in the chat box what you thought about that story. Imagine having to seal up the windows to prevent her from climbing in. Because you could never tell, all your documents would go missing. and she wouldn't know where she put them. She just wouldn't know. Such is the nature of the disease. Mischief, forgetfulness, and sometimes, just violence. For some Alzheimer's patients, they become violent, which is what we've seen with what we saw with our mother. Defiant. Yes, she was extremely defiant. Now, some might ask where are my khakis, where did that name come from? So I'm going to tell you. My mother would spend time milling around her home, which she knew well, but we didn't trust her driving around town. She was, however, very attached to her car. Several copies of car keys and house keys were made so my brother and the neighbor could keep copies in case Mommy locked herself out. She was also equipped with a cell phone to call my brother in case of an emergency. Needless to say, he was bombarded with phone calls while in meetings at work or on the road. Sometimes she would call him to ask where she was supposed to be going and other strange questions. She even called me in Ireland when I lived there one day to ask me where she was supposed to be going because she was dressed and she had no idea why she was dressed and where she was going. It was funny. We should have been worried about her driving early on, but at that time we weren't too bothered. The feeling was that she wouldn't go too far. Her favorite drive was to a roti shop on the Diego Martin main road. She would go through the back of Diamond Vale to get home. During one of my visits to Trinidad, she asked me if I wanted a roti and proceeded to drive to her favorite place. Her driving was erratic at times and I had to block my eyes with my hands in fear. But we made it to the destination unscathed. My mother drove skillfully into the tiny parking lot in front of the roti shop and walked through the wide open doors like she owned the shop. So during this visit, it was 11:30 a.m. and a few patrons were on site buying their lunch. The attendants at the counter smiled when they saw Miss Gloria. She boasted to them that I was her daughter visiting from the cold, and they smiled gleefully as my mother ordered 2 bone chicken rotis. They know me here, she told them, or she told me. I found out later that they knew her so well that sometimes she came with short change, like $5 to purchase a $15 roti. But they forgave her because she was an old regular, and they possibly recognized that she suffered from some form of dementia. Backing the car onto Diego Martin main road after shopping was tricky for any driver, but Mommy drove with confidence and screamed at anyone who challenged her. Let him drive over me. And this is how she would put her finger. Over me. He can drive over me. She would yell at the blowing car horns like a homing pigeon, and by a miracle, in my opinion, she would easily get through a side road into Diamond Vale and back to her house. So what do you all think about that? Driving onto the Diego Martin main road to get a roti. That is what my mother did. Because she loved her car and she loved roti and she was going to get her roti, no matter what. Diane, the car situation. Oh, yes. So, Diane, you're familiar with that story. And we're forgetting where they're going. Oh, yes. But she always liked to dress up and go out. And, have car will travel. She had to dress up and go out. And many times she knew she had a meeting or something, but by the time she was dressed, she didn't know where she was going, unfortunately. My cousin Ricky warned us about my mother's driving, saying she was a danger to herself and the general public. As we tried to wean Mommy away from her car and driving on the roads, Colette started giving her the wrong car keys. This trick enraged my mother as she tried to open the car and the keys wouldn't work. She would then complain to Colette that the keys were not working, and Colette would just say, "Oh, I don't understand why." This was the ultimate deceit, but we were afraid that she would get into an accident while driving. My mother had also become very stingy with her car when we visited on vacation, and she proclaimed loudly that nobody could use her car unless she was in it, and we had to go back wherever we came from and get our own car. Since her vehicle was parked in the garage most of the time, I attempted once to use it to go for a swim, and she threatened to chop me. She snatched the car keys, which are usually placed in a green glass bowl on top of the refrigerator, and ran with them to her bedroom. I followed in hot pursuit, and I watched her put the keys in a jewelry box on her dressing table. I then walked away quickly before she could realize that I knew where the keys were hidden. Just as predicted, within half an hour, she had forgotten where the keys were hidden. I took the keys from the jewelry box and kept them in my own room. When I asked Mommy where I could find the keys, she headed for the glass bowl on top of the fridge, which was the usual resting place for the keys. Not finding them, she raised the alarm and looked all around the house frantically. "Where are my car keys? Where are my car keys? I have to go to buy a roti. Lindy, where are my car keys?" she asked. "Well, I'm sure they're wherever you left them," I said in mischief. So it takes two to tango, and she loved mischief, so I gave her some of her own medicine. When we felt she could no longer care for herself, I hid the car keys and never gave them back. It was a terrible thing to do, and I felt guilty. It was so sad to watch as my mother bawled like a baby, not being able to find her car keys. Her independence was stripped away abruptly. She loved driving, and she would recognize that car long into the final stages of Alzheimer's disease, when she no longer knew who I was. Let's see, what do you all think about that, the driving? Oh, hi Nancy, good to see you. Oh yes, Carol, let them drive over me. That's what she would say. Anybody who wanted to pass her or even blew a horn at her car, she'd say, "Drive over me." That was her favorite. Yes, but what do we all think about taking away her car keys? We had to do it. We had to do it. She loved to drive, but she was a danger to herself and the general public, unfortunately. So hence the name of the book. Because we knew she loved to drive, and taking away her car keys was like the ultimate loss of independence for a driver. All right, now I'm going to read about a few passages about when my mother lived at a senior's home. So she was staying at one senior's home, and things didn't work out. We were not too pleased with the care she was receiving there. So after a long stay in the hospital and trying to revive her, she was moved to another senior's home. And this was up in the hills in Maracas, St. Joseph. So every year I would go around December and try to have a nice birthday party for her. Her birthday is December 29th. And so we'd have a nice birthday party every year, December 29th. By 2017, we could sense my mother's swift demise and possible end. Most of the staff at the seniors' home had left, and a series of new helpers would come and go. They were probably not willing to make that journey or not committed to this type of difficult work. Only 2 faithful staff members remain from the original people we met when my mother first started going there. I visited in April, and it was a good time as any to sit with my mother, look at pictures, and read stories. In April 2017, her body was weak and fragile, and her ability to focus was gone. I couldn't get any response when I called on the phone, so it was better to visit with her in person and hold her skinny hands. She had whittled down from a robust woman into a shell of herself. Her eyes sometimes searched mine when I called her name. She recognized her name, Gloria. One time she touched me in recognition while I spoke to my daughter on the cell phone. It was as if she was saying that I should speak to her instead of spending time on the phone. We all felt the end was near, but I still hoped that she could hold on longer, just a little longer, to celebrate her 85th birthday and meet the new year. So in 2017, we knew that the end was coming. Let's see. Also, we have some comments here about the driving. Yes, it was for her own safety and others. Yes, you know, when the elderly parent is attached to or likes to go out, as my mother did, dress up and go out all the time, taking away the car keys was really, truly a loss of independence. What I'm going to read now is the last birthday party, which was December 2017. So in December 2017, my brother had a big birthday party, and I came home the first week in December to celebrate. And I thought, well, I couldn't return to Toronto, then go back for December 29th. So I thought I'd have my mother's birthday party, which would have been her 85th birthday, December 2017. So I decided to celebrate her birthday right after my brother's birthday. Why are you going through all this trouble? Asked my sister. Because I want to, I said. I would feel riddled with guilt if I didn't have some kind of celebration for my mother, and she died before or around the time of her birthday. My motivation may have been guilt from not living in Trinidad to see her regularly. However, I felt it was necessary to celebrate her fragile existence and make sure everybody else joined me at the party. Many of her friends who were still in contact couldn't come for one reason or the next, and I was very upset with them. Didn't they know my mother's birthday was extremely important to me? With my single focus, I assumed that everybody else would drop whatever they were doing and accommodate my program. Of course, this was unreasonable. One of my mom's best friends, too, had another outing to go to, and she decided that she would come on December 29th and celebrate with Mommy. So I enlisted the help of Letitia and Elizabeth, 2 friends, to come with me and do party preparation. I alerted the owner of the seniors' home in advance to have the staff clean the living room, especially the fabric furniture, which always seemed to have the lingering smell of the last few residents that sat in them. I bought hors d'oeuvres and a birthday cake at the nearby supermarket and got lots of juices and drinks to prepare for my mom's birthday party. I wanted to give her a little gift, but for someone who could barely speak at that stage and couldn't walk and had little or no appetite, what gift could one possibly get? I headed to the Eastern Main Road just an hour before the party was supposed to start to find a simple gift at one of the stores. My idea was to get a doll to hug or a stuffed toy. On entering a party supply store, the associate took me around to see their selection of stuffed toys. Eventually, I picked a brown teddy bear with a red heart that held the words, "I love you," in front. The store clerk said, "I hope your daughter likes the teddy bear." It was then I told him the teddy was for my mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's disease and needed something to hug. The young man became visibly shaken and hung his head down. He could barely speak to me after that. I was so surprised to see the effect these words had on him. "Don't worry," I said. "She's like a big child. She would love the teddy bear. Don't feel sad for her. Thanks for helping me." How could a total stranger feel so sad? This made me feel like crumbling and crying for my mother right there too. I felt like I was going to fall on the ground. She had been such a tough woman in her youth and was now reduced to having a child's mind. So what do you all think about that? What would you get? What sort of gift could you possibly get for somebody who couldn't walk, couldn't speak, was on their last leg, literally? Put in the chat box what gift you think you would get if you had to make such a decision. And anybody here, any of the listeners, anybody had to deal with a parent who has Alzheimer's disease or any form of dementia, put it in the chat box. Let me know. Anybody? Just leave a comment in the chat box. Okay, so I'll just finish off by telling you all what happened and my attitude at the time. We either laughed or we cried. We chose to laugh at many of the situations. So while we waited for friends to arrive at the party, the staff at the seniors' home dressed my mother in a red and white batik party dress. "Gloria, Gloria, happy birthday. We're having a party for you," we said. She only lifted her head up when we called her name, and then she hung her head back down. Poor Mommy may have been in pain, but we would never know. She opened her eyes, looked around briefly, smiling at the crowd. Then she hung her head back down. I presented her with her stuffed toy, and she looked at it and smiled. Before I knew it, Mommy had bit into the face of the teddy bear. Like a baby who puts everything in her mouth, she was actually biting the teddy bear. If we didn't laugh, we would cry. "No, Mommy, no, don't bite the teddy," I screamed. Just hug it, just hug it." I tried to make her hug the toy, but this was in vain. She may have been hungry or just acting on instinct. Again, we would never know. My sister gave her a bunch of flowers and said, "Happy birthday, Mommy." She held the flowers and must have bitten into them too when we were not looking, because we saw petals falling out of her mouth. The gift giving turned out to be a disaster. But we were not deterred. We sang the happy birthday song loudly with the help of friends and some of the staff. We cut up the cake, fixed plates of food so all the residents at the home, and I tried to feed Mommy with some of the food. So what do you all think about that? Trying to, I would say, literally force a birthday party onto my mom. I know it was, as I mentioned, my guilt of not living in Trinidad. I just wanted to do something while she was still alive, so I staged a birthday party. Okay, Natasha said she could give lipstick or something that they don't remember having. Hey, that's a good idea. Mrs. Bird said, my mother enjoyed when I took her for a drive. Yes, yes. But at that stage, we had stopped driving her around because she couldn't walk, and getting her into a car would have been a challenge. Okay, so Mrs. Bird said her mother liked to sit at the piano because she had been a pianist and organist. Yes, those are good ideas. But at that stage, my mother, I don't think she could even sing or listen to music. She was a music teacher for years, and yet she didn't respond when they had musical activities at the seniors' home. Okay, so Diane said her mom is experiencing some early stages. Yes, that's what happens. And we have to be very patient with the patient. And I tell people to be careful what you say in front of the Alzheimer's patient, because they hear everything and they respond afterwards. So if you imagine they're not understanding what you're saying, think again. Because we had one case of that with my mother. She looked around at many things, said nothing, and then a day after, she responded. So you have to be very careful what you say in front of the Alzheimer's patient. You treat them like a regular human being, literally. Don't say anything bad about them in their presence, because they're listening and processing the information in their own way. We have to be careful. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to read near the end of the book. I have written what I call a victim statement. So it's a long poem or prose talking about what my mother was thinking, or what I imagined she was thinking through this whole period. So I'm just going to read the last part of the victim statement. It's like a victim impact statement. The last stage before she died, she was in the hospital taking her last breath, literally, hooked up to machines. So this is what I imagine she thought. It's painful. I can't speak. The room is quiet. She comes to visit. Mommy, I'm your daughter. I came to see you. Are you okay? She holds my hand and cries, who is my daughter? More people come to visit and look at me. I can't open my eyes now. I can feel their presence. A large group is there. Gloria, everyone came to see you. Lindy, Colette, Brent, Audrey, Kenrick. They talk loudly at my bedside. Too much noise, they're so loud. He pinches my toe. Ouch! I move my leg, I can feel my foot. So much pain. My body is heavy and cold. I can't hold on. They are all looking at me. The next day the doctor speaks to all of them. I can hear them. We recommend palliative care. She'll never get better. Give permission for no resuscitation. She could die any day now. What does that mean? Is it time to give up? I'm hungry. The pamper is dirty. I can't move. My head is lying on one side, my two arms spread out. Some familiar voices are arguing. At least they could have changed her. They didn't even feed her by syringe. The food is still sitting there. She has bed sores. Oh my God, they're wicked in this hospital. The oxygen mask is digging into her eye. Fix it, fix it. She's been in that same position for 2 days and nobody even fixed the mask. Move her body to the other side. So much noise and shouting. 2 people cleaning me and I'm lying on the next side. I still can't breathe. There's a machine, there's a tube hooked up to me. I can't open my eyes. Who are all these people? They hug me and then they say goodbye. They all leave me alone. I know they love me. I want to die. I am tired. I can't breathe. Drifting. No more pain. The end. So that is the end of Where Are My Car Keys? Where Are My Car Keys? A Mother's Journey with Alzheimer's Disease. And so at the end of the book, I write the victim's statement of what I think she was seeing and hearing when we were all there at her bedside in the hospital. And we can only imagine, because she actually moved slightly while we were all at her bedside and she hadn't moved for a long time. So we think she was hearing us. So I put in the chat box JennylyndJames.com/books. Here you can find out information on all my books. What do you all think about this? How many people here? I know Diane said her mother is suffering or has the early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. Anybody else? Let me know what you think. Put a comment in the chat box. And please remember to like my Facebook page. That is the end of our presentation today. So please like my Facebook page, Jennylynd James Writer. Check out my website and subscribe to my website as well, so you can get alerts when we have the next book reading. So that's the end of my presentation today. Where Are My Car Keys? And as I said, I wrote this book as a form of healing when my mother died, because it helps me to deal with all that happened. And it was over 12 years that we saw our mother go down slowly, slowly. So it was a long and drawn out period. But writing the book certainly helped a lot with the healing process. You're most welcome, Diane. I'm very happy to share the story with others because, as I said, it helped me in my journey for healing, and I think the book could possibly help others because many people have parents or loved ones who are going through this affliction. As I mentioned, I also have Is That My Granny? I won't read from this, but I have on my YouTube channel, a little girl from Trinidad read this beautifully and she understood the meaning. So it talks about my mother's journey again through the eyes of my nephew, who saw her slow demise over the years and her change in mood and her body and everything. So the book, the children's book, describes the same story, and it's good to, if you want to initiate a discussion on Alzheimer's disease with a child, this book is very useful. to start a discussion, because children see everything. They know what's going on. You can't hide it from them because, they observe. So it's good to have a discussion with children if they have a grandparent or great-grandparent who is suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming. Don't forget to subscribe to my Facebook page, Jennylynd James Writer. And also check out my website, jennylyndjames.com, books, and subscribe to my website as well. And there you can learn about all the books. Now I have a new novel coming up, Mrs. Somebody. So keep your calendars free. August 9th, we will be launching Mrs. Somebody. What she did for that ring. So it's full of jokes and lots of dating stories and what women would do to find Mr. Right. So I hope you keep August 9th free for the book launch. All right, I want to see you at the book launch on August 9th, Mrs. Somebody. Thank you so much, everybody, and goodbye. Thanks so much for spending your Sunday evening with me. Take care. Bye, everybody.